Today we're going to talk about changing the wires on a distributor, Mercury Marine distributor. This one right here is a 6-cylinder, and this is the distributor cap, which you don't really want. It's they tend to leak, carbon track, and they were made out of a trackable material, and they were superseded by the cap, which I'll show you in a minute or two. But doing wires is something you do if you're been chewed by a rat or a squirrel or a mouse, or if you've got one of these old distributor caps, or if you've been really lucky and somebody rewired it back in the 50s and 60s with that clear stuff, or that plastic wire which is so stiff you can't even rotate it. Those would be the reasons why you'd want to change them. But typically when you're doing these, you want to do them one wire at a time, because you got to have them all different lengths, and they are very difficult to deal with. So if you see this one right here, this one right here, what I do is I typically cut one wire off, and then I pull it through the sleeve here, pull it through the sleeve here, and I pull it through the sleeve here. I do not cut them, I pull them through. You have to lubricate them a little bit. Of course, the second one's a lot easier on that part, but through here gets easier too as it gets less. I typically undo these, loosen these nuts up if you're lucky enough to have been in fresh water and somebody greased them. Loosen them up, pull these out of there. If not, bend them out, pull them out, and then pull the whole loom through with these pieces of rubber protection on them. And now you've got the distributor cap undone, and this old one, there's only 2 screws holding it on, and you got the whole thing out on your bench, but still one wire at a time. And they are screwed in at this end, and I'll show you that as well. So there've been a lot of questions of this on the 6-cylinder inline, and I thought I'd cover it and also cover the 4-cylinder as well. The little number tags, they slide off with a little bit of effort. You have to lube them sometimes, and these ends come off, and they've got a spring, and I'll show you how to do those as well. But they are reusable. This is reusable. The little numbers reusable, these protections are reusable, this is reusable, and these caps are reusable. But the end on the cable itself is not. We'll start with the 6 cylinders first. This is the oldest cap right here. It's a replacement for that dark green one we saw over there. This can be a number of different colors. It can be blue, like this one. It can be gray, like this one. But it's a replacement cap. It has screws for 2 holes. It was used on dual coil, dual point ignition, the first one, Mark 75 on up, and it was used in the capacitive discharge maker point ignition, and then just the capacitive discharge single coil one. But the same distributor cap was used in all of them. And then they went to, and the next iteration was a cap that still had 6, but it was a different style, and the trigger was different than this one. And here are 2 different colors of that same 6-cylinder version right there. They come in, I've seen them in red, and I've seen them in black as well. All of these are made out of a plastic which is non-conductive. In other words, it can't carbon track like that old green one can. Then we have a 4-cylinder. Right here is the original one. That was on a 650 4-cylinder, very early, 67 I do believe. And then they went to a Thunderbolt ignition on the 650 4-cylinder and on the 4-cylinder 50. And this is the last one, which was used on the 850. 3-cylinder 650, again all non-conductive. And then we have here the 4-cylinder magneto, which also had a conductive end, and they changed it to this one. That one was also dark green, like the one we saw over there. These are held in a little differently. These are screwed in with little screws right here, and you can pull the wires out. They have O-rings on the end. And we have here a Fairbanks Morse. This was the vertical one, which was the first, and this one does have screw-in ends. And I'll unscrew this one and show you what they look like. You can see it's threaded and it's crimped. This has been Raja crimped. I don't know if it's soldered too, but that's what I typically do. Same way with this one. They're all screwed in. You cannot pull them out. They're screwed. And again, they're crimped on a machine at the end, so those are not reusable. Unless they were soldered, and I think then you could probably use them. Unsolder them and pull them out after you get them out of the distributor cap. But as I say, one wire at a time, and you do need to cut it and then pull it through all the other things, because screwing it back in again, you still have to put it back through all those, and you want to get it in the right place. So you do them one at a time. You don't take them all out at once, because then you'll get everything screwed up. So believe me, I've done it. I've done it wrong a million times. Okay, these later ones, same deal. They're screwed in. And there we go. There it be, screwed in. So I'll now show you how to solder it. What I do with setting them up to solder. I'll do a quickie. These are the mercury ends that I recommend. The 7mm wire doesn't seem to fit into the aftermarket ones, at least not in my experience. And this is what I recommend. You can see what they look like. There it is right there. So what I like to do is I solder them and I also crimp them. But I didn't always have the crimper, and I didn't always crimp them. So I tried different methods to crimp, and nothing worked other than the Raja. First thing we do is take a very little bit of the insulation off the top. Tiny amount. Just enough to attract the solder. Then I flatten it out on the end to get a lot of contact. Spread it out. Okay, so now it'll fit down in. Okay, so the next thing I do is I put this thing in my vise. I don't grab it too tight. I don't want to bugger the threads up. So we've got our end all cleaned right here. All right, and now we're going to put rosin core solder, melt it into the end. I don't put a lot in, just enough. Cover the bottom, and then I take this end. You got that flared out at the end. It doesn't get to the edge, so it'll slide right down in. And I put it in like that. And I hold it in for a sufficient amount of time. Make sure that it's hardened. And then I pull on it. And I'm pulling on it, and it's good and firm. Now, since you guys are interested in seeing the whole complete operation, I do a Raja. This is a Raja clamp. So it goes in, I think, like this, yes. And you put it so it's just on the edge, and you crimp it. and you can see it does a fairly good job. So that's where we start with this. Then we slide our cap over like this cap right here. I typically heat them up just a little bit and I slide them over at this end. They don't slide on easily. A little bit of torch work. Make sure you slide it on the right way. You can also put it on first. It makes sometimes absolutely it's easier to put it on first and slide it way up. And now we have the distributor end done. So what I do once I've done this is I cut it to the length of the other one. I measure the short piece that I cut. Okay, here's the piece I cut. And then I take the rest of it that I cut off and I hold it on there, measure off exactly the amount I need to be the same as the other one. Don't make them longer because you'll wish you hadn't when you're all done. And then you cut it off, okay? So now the other end, a little bit different matter. So this is the same type that's on here. This would be the end we're dealing with, okay? And what I do with these is I try and loosen them up by wiggling them around a little bit, and I squirt a little bit of lubricant in there. I use a corrosion guard, Mercury's corrosion guard. And then I reach in and I push the side in. There's a little coil of wire in there. I'll explain to you why I do it this way in a minute. I can show you what. Okay. This is not an easy job, and it's not something I recommend everybody do. And for any reason your wires are in good shape and your cap looks good, God, try to avoid it. This one's coming out a little harder. If you pull them out the other way, you bend this spring out and it's not really reusable. So you want to pull them out the way I just did with the pliers. Now the end comes right off. There it is right there. And now you got your little card number. This is number 2 right here. So we got all the pieces for the other end. We thread it through all those rubber pieces that I showed you earlier, and then you slide this piece on. Just do it in reverse. All right, slide it on. Like a piece of cake. I'm going to cut this off flush like it was a new end. Okay. Okay, there, we slide that back and we put this end on. Hold it right here on the end. And now we gotta start it in the hole. Starting, it's got a sharp end on it if you can see it right there. And Now you want this to go through the middle of the wire so it basically cuts the wire or goes into the wire inside the rubber. You don't want it going down the side and not making contact with the inner wire. You can do it like that, or if you really want to make sure, what I do with these sometimes is, let's see here, we have somewhere. I'll take a little bit off again. Old wire is a little bit tougher to deal with than new wire. Yeah, this is receding. There we go. And bend this down, flare it out, like I say, and then you do this. Okay. Now it's going to make excellent contact. There. All right. I'm going to take a little bit of grease, hopefully non-conductive grease, and I squirt a little bit in here, and I put a little bit on this. And now hopefully it'll slide into the end nicely.
Is in effect. Snow starting overnight, likely after midnight. But hey, we are starting. It already feels. Doesn't it already feel like it, right? It's starting to haze up.
Well, I'm going to start it with my pliers. There we go. All right. Now I pushed it in, and you're going to go in till you can see it inside. That is inside. I can feel it with the end of the pliers. So that's the way the job ends. Each wire individually. Do not do them all at once, or it'll be a horrible mess, and nothing will come out right when you put it back on the engine. So, as I said, you take it off the distributor cap. Doing a wire job is not easy. It's going to take quite a few hours, and it takes a lot of equipment. You do not pull them out. These were pulled out by somebody who didn't understand. They thought it was automotive. They're not. If you do run into one that's been pulled out like this, you can typically undo them like this. And there's the end. It's not reusable if it's been crimped. Second thing is, when they're yellow wires like this, I rarely ever replace them unless they've been chewed. I've had real good luck with these. If the wires are supple and they're not chewed and they're not worn, I'd leave them alone. A couple other side notes here. We have the 4-cylinder magneto right here. These are considerably easier to work on. You've got a screw way down in here, so I'll just take one out. Fall out. There's the screw, and it's pointed at the end, as you can see, so it pierces the wire. Has an O-ring on it, and there's where the screw went through. You want to make sure you put a non-conductive grease on the O-ring. When you put it, you can reuse that on the new wire, and you screw it, push it in. all the way to the end. Make sure you're in far enough and put your screw back in again and screw it down tight. And that's how these work. Fairbanks Morse conductive cap works the same way. They did not make a non-conductive cap for the Fairbanks Morse, but this one is a non-conductive cap. The earlier one, I say, was that dark green that you saw in that 6-cylinder at the very beginning. This one is a Fairbanks Morse, an early one that screw in. I think some of them actually will push in too. And then they had the side ones which come in like that, and they work just like these do, screwed in from the top. And that about wraps it up.